establish the Second Amendment because it would reduce our crime rate. They wrote the Second Amendment because they wanted to live in a country in which men were free.
There was a guy on top of the building.
Our right to keep and bear arms has nothing to do with crime statistics. It has nothing to do with popular public opinion. Our rights are not conditional on any of these things. They have been endowed to us not by our government, but by our Creator. I'm sure that we'll hear from others today who will remind us of what we in Vermont already know, that strict gun control usually correlates to higher violent crime rates. But even if the evidence wasn't on our side, it still comes down to a fundamental issue of rights. I've heard people trying to compare owning guns to owning cars. They say, well, isn't it reasonable? We require insurance and training and license and inspection every 2 years. Isn't that the responsible thing to do? The problem is that driving a car is not a constitutional right. If you want to make a comparison, I would say a better one would be the right to vote. And what does that mean? Well, fiscal barriers like poll taxes were seen as fundamental infringements upon somebody's ability to exercise their right. Same thing with requiring people to take some kind of a test. When I was campaigning last election, I literally had one woman tell me that requiring a photo ID to vote was fundamentally racist. So how are these things unfair when discussing the right to vote, but not the right to bear arms?
Exactly.
Can you imagine if we had a 48-hour cooling off period before you could vote? Or before you could exercise your freedom of speech? I mean, the idea is absurd, What if we required people to pass a background check before they registered to vote? Or before they wrote a letter to the editor of their local newspaper to have their First Amendment right? Right now, under Vermont state law, we allow convicted felons both to own a firearm and to vote. And this is one of the dangers in one of the provisions in H124 that on its face seems reasonable, but needs a closer look. As law is currently written, any crime that carries a possible sentence of more than 2 years will cause you to forever lose your right to protect you and your family by owning a firearm. If you make a mistake on your taxes, do you think you should lose your right to keep and bear arms? What about if you write a bad check? If you find a dead lobster on the beach of Maine that happens to be short and take it home as a souvenir, then you're in violation of the Lacey Act. And felony convictions under the Lacey Act carry a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. And so you would lose your right to own a firearm in Vermont under H124. So I don't think we should blindly accept such a vague definition of felony, nor should we accept that it can be changed at any time outside of our borders at the federal level. If you commit a violent crime, that's one thing. But this is an issue worth sitting down and sorting out. The individual states were designed to hold accountable the federal government, not to roll over and submit to it. The state of Vermont is where most of our laws should be made, and the federal government needs to respect and adapt to our laws, not the other way around. I think in Vermont, we love to buy local, and I think we also like to govern local. We need to be extremely careful when taking away or restricting anyone's rights. That deserves an incredibly thoughtful process. We should not just be taking our cues from the federal government. Our state legislature owes it to us, the people of Vermont, to think these things out. And that's why we've sent them here. If they're too busy to think about the laws before they pass them, then we need to find new representatives who are willing and more qualified to do the job. It seems like every day we wake up and read the news that some right has been taken away out of the hands of free men and women, and that the power has been transferred to some central authority. Now, do we prevent and place restrictions on people owning fire extinguishers over a certain capacity? No. We put power in the hands of people. We don't prevent people from buying fire extinguishers just because we have well-trained firefighters. The problem with this and other laws is that they aren't carefully thought through. My grandparents live over 30 minutes away from the closest police department, and the closest state trooper station is the same distance. So depending on where those police cars are, someone breaks into my grandmother's house, it's not unreasonable to think it could take almost an hour for someone to get there. And legislators who live between exits 16 and 10 on I-89 forget that the rest of the state looks very different. I know for a fact that one of the bill's sponsors lives not more than 2 miles away from the closest police department. They might be able to get to her house in under a minute, but they won't get to my grandmother's that fast. When it comes to protecting yourself from violent criminals, the unfortunate reality here in Vermont is that unfortunately many of us are on our own. That is why it's so important for us to defend these rights that the founders of our nation and the founders of first the Republic and then the state of Vermont have given to us. They intended for us to be free men and women, able to defend our lives, our properties, our families by ourselves. That is the thing that is so wonderful about Vermont. People take responsibility for themselves. Look at how we handled Irene. Vermont bounced back because of our state's love of radical decentralization. We didn't sit around and wait for the state to get their act together. We'd probably still be waiting. We took care of ourselves. We need to stop Montpelier's tendency to grab everything under this golden dome, continually centralizing and restricting our individual rights and responsibilities, and instead continue to put power and choices back into the hands of individuals who know better than some legislator how to run their own lives. I keep hearing this question over and over again. Well, why does anyone need an assault rifle? And when they say it, it sounds like a reasonable question. The underlying assumption, though, is that if you don't need something, then we, the government, should be able to restrict it or make it illegal. You see the problem with that logic?
That's dangerous.
I mean, what if we ask the same question of other things? Why does anyone need to make over $100,000 a year? Most people are okay with just 50. Why does anybody need to go hunting? They don't need it for food. We've got grocery stores. Right? Why does anybody need anything more than food, shelter, clothing? Why do we need poetry, art, sports teams, the NFL? Don't get stuck into that argument. You have no obligation to even answer that question. Remember, they are the ones who are attacking your rights. If anything, those who want to restrict your rights are the ones who need to be answering questions. Why do you need to restrict my rights as an innocent, law-abiding Vermonter? I don't see any need for that, do you? You don't need a reason to defend them. But if you do, we have the Bill of Rights. The burden of proof is on them. They are the aggressors in this case. They are the ones trying to turn over 230 years of history and amend the Constitution. And personally, I don't even own a firearm, and I have no intention to, or at least I used to. Never felt like I needed it. But right now, my right is in danger, and there's legislation that's putting pressure on many of us to go out and make purchases that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise thought we needed to before it's too late. And what troubles me is that the people who ask these questions do not seem to understand the importance and centrality of freedom. The answer to all those why questions is because I choose to. In a free society, no man or woman has any obligation to tell someone, especially from the state, why they're doing or owning or purchasing anything that they do. It's like the state has become a 3-year-old. Why? 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 Why do we have to keep letting you have this right that you've had for so long? And what do you usually say to a persistent toddler? Because I said so. And that answer applies here more than you think. When you say it as a parent, it's done with authority. And in this state and in this country, we the people are the authority. The people in Montpelier have no power and no authority over you other than what you delegate. And you can always delegate that to someone else. In Vermont and in America, we respect one another's individual freedoms as being more important than the expediency of one group's perspective on the greater good. As long as you are not directly harming someone else, you're free to do as you please. We are a free people, or at least we used to be. But my friends and fellow citizens, we are losing that distinction. We are losing this battle on all fronts. We are losing the one thing that once made America a radical experiment in self-rule and made us the envy of the world. So many of our other freedoms are being chipped away at, little by little, like a frog in boiling water. We're gathered here today as a rally around our freedom to choose when or if we decide to own a firearm or any of its accessories. But what about our other freedom to choose our children's education, buy the kind of health care we want? What other freedoms to keep what we've earned, to travel without unwarranted search and seizure? So many of our freedoms have already been eroded. And where were we? I can only speak for myself and say that I was asleep. But I am thankful to our founders who knew that such a day may come, when we, the people of this continent, might be on the brink of losing such freedoms our forefathers died to give to us. And that is why they wrote the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That is why they wrote Article 16 to the Vermont State Constitution. They knew that the infringements on keeping and bearing firearms was going to be the backstop of liberty. So we find ourselves at a critical turning point. Will we continue to give up our freedoms in exchange for a politician's promise of safety? Oh, good. That's the answer I was hoping for. Remember, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, which is something I think we've all forgotten. We thought that just because the generations before us fought against such infringements that they secured our freedoms. And we're all here today because we see that such rights are not secure from a legislature that is so eager to take them in whatever increment they think they can get away with. I mean, don't you see that their actions speak louder than their words? And the fact that legislators are saying, well, nobody wants to ban all guns, is contradicted by the spirit of such laws like H.336 that make it illegal to point a gun at anyone, even in self-defense, and even if you're a police officer. I didn't find any exceptions there. So that's kind of like saying, well, you can have a gun, but you can never, ever, ever use it or you go to jail. You tell me, does that sound like freedom to you? Does that sound like your right to keep and bear arms is not being infringed? I usually like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I have absolutely lost my patience with such deceptive practices. And the fact that you're here today suggests that your patience has grown thin too. No, technically they aren't taking your guns, but you're taking away your right to use them to protect yourself, even if you never fire a shot. And the thing that really irritates me, and even people who don't agree with this on this issue, we have a legislature that's spending an awful lot of time working on a solution that does not have a problem. Trust me, there are many other more important problems that we have here in Vermont. Forget about the more divisive issues like health care or tax structure. What about the roads in Vermont? Is anybody spending half as much time on improving the roads as they are on restricting our rights? It doesn't seem like it to me. Our legislators are waiting all this time battling over gun control in one of the safest states in the country that has one of the most generous gun laws in the country. If I could talk to Montpelier, I would say, Montpelier, please stop wasting our time and money picking fights on this issue. There are too many other more important things that our state legislature needs to be doing. And I just want to go home and spend time with my family and get back to my business. I don't want to spend my tax dollars and several hours a week fighting you for the rights that we already have. Stop restricting the people and go back to restricting government for a change. So now each and every one of you here has an important decision to make. What will you do? You've got a pretty comfortable routine. You go to work, have dinner with your family, take kids to practice. Life's busy. You can't imagine doing anything much more. But that's because you imagine that everything else will be the same if you don't get involved. And I'm here to tell you we have no such assurance. What's harder to imagine for me is what if I don't get involved? And what if we lose this fight? What if we lose more? What if we keep losing and our children and our grandchildren wake up one morning in a world that looks very different from the one that we have today? In the spirit of liberty and freedom, I'm not here to tell you what to do. But there are a lot of great organizations that we're going to hear from today that you should check out. Gun Owners of Vermont is here. Vermont Federation of Sportsmen is here. But that's not for you. Check out some other organization or start your own. It's a free country. I know I've gotten started to get involved with Vermonters for Liberty, an organization that seeks to protect all of our liberties, including the one that we're here defending today. And think about if you want to get involved in whatever political party you identify with. Republicans, Democrats, progressives, libertarians, they all need voices of reason like you. Otherwise, they'll continue to tread on our rights. I'm just one person like you. I have a busy life, just like you. I'm nobody special. In fact, I'm a loser. The main reason I'm here is because I lost a house race. That's probably the only reason they asked me to speak, and if I had won, Linda wouldn't have introduced this bill.
You're here because you care!
That's true. I am. But when this bill's sponsor said that only 3 people from her district contacted her in opposition to this bill, I decided to give up about 4 or 5 hours last week to go out and get signatures for a petition. And if you live in Essex Junction, please come find me after, okay? But is this little petition going to change the world? No. But it sends a message to my representative, and it spreads a message to my neighbors. And it's that message, that freedom is incredibly expensive, but it is worth the price of eternal vigilance. That is the message that 230 years ago changed the course of history on this continent and eventually changed the world. Thank you very much.